Everybody, welcome to is it the 11th or 12th Talent Cafe of 2020. This has really taken on momentum of its own. And I'm very happy to welcome Vanessa, who is going to share with us today navigating new work futures. As we know, everything is changing. COVID has thrown us with a curveball. The world has literally been turned upside down. And we have all had to learn how to do Zoom and Teams and all sorts of random apps and ways of working and continuing to keep the ball rolling in 2020. So very happy to introduce Vanessa. I like to let our presenters introduce themselves because you know yourself better, hopefully, than what I do. So very welcome, Vanessa. Thank you for joining us. I will be managing the waiting room, letting people in as they come in, but the floor is yours. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, everybody. I am Vanessa. I am here today to share what my perspectives are about the future world of work and how that might affect you. Just by way of introduction, I am a mother. I recently completed some studies on future studies. So I consider myself to be a futurist. And then I am also an industrial psychologist, so a behavioral specialist, and hoping to bring all of that together today to share with you some of my expertise, but also to learn from each one of you, as I do believe this is a conversation. I'd hate to speak to myself for the next hour, so please feel free to pop in any questions, and we will definitely have some time at the end to work together. Sure. So our company is focused on bringing together the dots on the horizon. We believe that it is important for people to create futures and that they have choice in the matter, and doing that in a caring way to bring about more transformational change for the future. What we do, we offer workshops. We also have coaching as a offering, and then we do assessments for organizations to look at potential for the future. We generally work with C-suite leaders, so your typical executives, leaders of innovation, those would be your creative directors, emerging leaders, young talent, and then even learners or students at varsity. But that's enough about us today, so let's focus on what you would be doing. We're going to have some learning about different methods. I'm going to share 5 methods of future studies with you and how you can apply that in your life and your organizations, as well as to the people around you. We're going to practice some skills towards the end of the presentation. And this is merely just a taster for you to get an idea of how you can apply future skills to various aspects of your life. And then the biggest, I think, contribution would be to open up your mind towards a different perspective on how to look at your context within a working environment. So those are the 3 things that I hope to achieve today. And as you can imagine, the future is quite broad. So to try and do this in a short space of time is probably not ideal, but it just gives you an idea. If you are ready to step out of your comfort zone, because this will probably ask you to think differently, I would like to invite you to what I refer to as the future zone. And this is typically where the magic happens. This is where you are able to create futures for you and for the people close to you. But let's do a quick poll for those on the call. I'm just going to launch the poll. You should be seeing it on your screen. If we can just take a minute or so to click on which of these options you see as an active way that you plan for your future. About your future, how often do you stop and think about it? Is it daily? Is it once a week? Is it every 2 to 3 weeks? Maybe you do it every 6 months, or possibly even once a year when you do your New Year's resolutions.
The polling seems to be closed for me as a co-host. I think about it whenever COVID happens.
I'm just going to share the results with you guys. So it looks like people generally plan for the future 1 to 3 months in advance. I'm just going to stop sharing the results. So why do we not necessarily stop to think about the future? People often discount the future. It is seen as too far or too remote. So we don't necessarily take a very long view. And when I say long view, I refer to about 10 to 20 years in advance, because we are stuck in our daily lives of just juggling what we have to do. Coming to the office, you have an email box of about 100 that you have to answer. So we don't always spend sufficient time on thinking about the future. So let's take a back step and look at how do we create context. First, as an entity, you could also look at yourself, your organization, your family. In the middle, there's a transactional environment around that you are not able to control fully. You have limited influence around that area. For example, as an organization, you are not necessarily always able to control everything in an organization. But if you broaden that circle to a contextual environment, looking at a social, political, technical environment, even the natural environment, you almost have no control and very little influence on that. If we look at what some of the risks are for Sub-Saharan Africa, unemployment or underemployment is listed as number 1. It is the risk in a working context from a perspective of what are the issues that we need to address. Our youth population by the year 2050 will be one in every 3 young people in the world will reside within Africa. So our youth population is busy expanding at a rapid rate. Then again, contextually, if we look at what the World Economic Forum is saying, they suggest, and please note, this was done in 2018, so we literally have another year or 2 to go, but they suggest that on average, employees will need to spend 101 days of retraining or upskilling before the end of 2022. Now, at the time that this was published, it worked out to about 33 odd days per employee per year. I don't know about you, but I don't really spend that much time on my own development. If we look at the new report that came out from the World Economic Forum, the Jobs of the Future report was recently released, and you're more than welcome to go and Google it. The jobs that are growing are definitely more science-based, so data analysts, AI and machine learning specialists, big data specialists, specialists, digital marketing and strategy specialists, and the ones that are decreasing are the ones that have routine, monotonous type of responsibilities. Even accountants and bookkeepers in the future, we will need less of them because most of what we will be doing will be driven through technology and artificial intelligence. If we look at the top 10 skills as predicted by the World Economic Forum, analytical thinking is still fairly high on that list, but you'll notice that they've indicated self-management skills, so active learning strategies, how to build resilience, is starting to creep into that top 10 skills for 2025. And if you now just go back to this statement where they indicated 33 days on average per year per person, how much of that time are you spending towards learning and learning strategies, resilience, and stress tolerance? So what they're saying is that we need to reskill our employees, about 50% of them by 2025. Now, if you're a learning specialist in an organization, just practically think about this. What does that mean to your budget? And how are you going to plan for that going forward? And even if you've got reskilling going on, within the next 5 years, your core skills are expected to change at least for 40% of your workforce. I don't know about you, but this definitely reminds me of a wicked problem. So wicked problems are social and cultural in nature. Those are typically problems that we are unable to solve through one solution. In fact, many of them are not even solvable. We could probably just hope to dissolve them or resolve some of the issues that bring about this challenge. So how do we go about looking at all of these wicked problems, the contextual environment around that, and anticipate how we can work towards the future? There are 3 basic laws of future studies. The first, the future is not predictable. So even if we think there's a crystal ball with some magic answer, it is not. We cannot predict what's going to happen in the future. Even something as simple as a forecast that's generally based on historic data is not accurate. We know that from predicting sales, people trying to predict their sales for the year ahead, and then heaven forbid we have COVID that then changes the whole context, and what we thought we would be doing last year has changed dramatically. The future is also not predetermined. So there's not a one single future. It cannot just be one way of looking at the future, because it is influenced by choice of individuals that are making up the society out there. So from a futures perspective, we look at the world through what we call a futures code. Many organizations spend a lot of time, let's just get my annotation going here. Many organizations spend a lot of time around the tactics. So it's 1 to 2 years. What is your budget for this year? And if we look at the talent management strategies, are you ready in 1 to 2 years or 2 to 5 years from now? And then most organizations spend energy around the strategy. They want a growth of 5% over the next 3 years. But what is not being considered is the aspects around the system level disruption. So how do we plan for that? And how do we work through our mindsets if If, for example, we're not even able to plan for talent. So yes, we may do talent reviews once a year or every 6 months if you're lucky, but you do not know, given the context, that skills will change and that people will need massive amounts of reskilling, or like I refer to it as future skilling. How do we work within this context when we don't know what we don't know? So you may have noticed that I refer to futures because we think about the future in open and pluralistic terms. We don't just see one future. If I go back one slide, you'll notice that the wider the lens towards the vision and the systems level disruption, the more options you'll have. So you have less certainty, but there might be more possible futures that could evolve and could emerge. So we do not look at the future as just one single determined outcome. It is definitely influenced by choice of individuals within organizations. So if we look at the drivers, because we need to consider from the contextual environment what will be influencing our world at work. Definitely extreme longevity. Previously, we may have lived for 65, 70 years, but it's predicted that the people that are being born today will probably live beyond 100 years. And how does that influence our pension funds? How does that influence our recruitment policies past the age of 60, 63, or 65? We have worlds of massive connection through Internet of Things. And more recently, Gartner listed the Internet of Behaviors. This is where every person will have a device connected to them, be it a watch, a phone, something that tracks their behavior, and then allows organizations to actually make changes to how and what they sell. Definitely smart machines. Artificial intelligence is giving us a lot of information. Machines are learning and being trained. Obviously, we have to be mindful of the bias that could bring in as well. The fourth one that I believe will definitely change our world is what I call superstruct organizations. These are organizations that cannot just have one hierarchical structure. We're going to work more in a team context, and we'll have more gig employees or part-time employees than what we currently do. And how might that change your perspective for your own career going forward? We're definitely going to have new media systems. Many of you may have noticed that all your devices, your social media platforms, we work with platforms such as Uber that can hail a transport vehicle for you. And that is just going to exponentially grow, continuing from where we are today. And then again, the global connection makes it easy for us, especially after COVID, to work from home. So you could be a designer, a web designer, a person that is managing a social media platform, and you could be sitting anywhere in the world and literally do that for another country abroad. So we do need to look at the dots in the horizon. And how do we connect those dots? So that is the what of what we need to look at. And then understand the significance. So what do we do with those dots that we are now able to connect? And how do we adapt what we know and what we do? So our practices within the organization or even in your family context. So if you look at, for example, some of the jobs that may appear in the future, we could have virtual reality programmers. In fact, we do have that already. A space tour guide. Elon Musk is not too far off in the future. They've launched all of these space shuttles already. So how do we think about a job in the future as a space tour guide? A maritime virtual security officer. These would be taking care of autonomous ships and boats rather than just autonomous cars. A digital removalist. That could be somebody that is responsible for removing your digital content, because we have a digital footprint on every site that we click, every posting that you make on Instagram, Facebook. And how might the world be if we remove that digital data to protect ourselves? Or if you're not an HR officer or a chief HR officer, you might be a chief robot officer, because in the future we'll have an environment where robots and humans will work in combination, possibly even in teams. And then how do we look at being rewilders? So look at planting trees, making sure that we have natural ecosystems that can sustain us in the future. And you may even have a cybersecurity specialist, a personal cybersecurity specialist, rather than that of an organization, or even a life extension technician. So how do you actually get to live to 150 years? And what do you need to do? And how can that life extension technician advise you? So I don't know about you, but it may make you feel like, whoa, I'm not sure this is actually for me. And how do we cope with all this uncertainty and all these options and alternatives to the future? So we probably have the choice either to keep our heads buried or to actually lift our gaze and look towards the future. And as futurists, we use different methodologies. So the methodologies that we have, I've just listed 5 that I'll share with you, but there's an endless list that I would like to encourage you to try and use some of these in your work context. So let's look at the first one, the futures triangle. So what we're trying to do here is to look at the past, the present, and then the future. So what are the weights of the past that keeps us back? As an example, in South Africa, we had apartheid, and that is definitely a weight to the social context of our country. Then, what are the pushes in the present moment? What trends, as I've mentioned before, and patterns are pushing us towards different futures? And what are the images that we can create that could pull us towards the future? We use this as a way to look at the connection through time, because everything that we are going to face in the future is interlinked with our past and the present. And time is not a continuum where we have a past, a present, and a future, but rather interlinked and connected every single moment of the day. So just to think about it, how far is this present moment? Like our session today together, did it start at 10 o'clock South African time? Or where does the past start and where does the present begin? And that's really tricky to identify that, because the present is continually moving. This you should all know. The SWOT analysis, we use SWOT analysis to look at opportunities, threats, strengths, and weaknesses. But what we tend to focus on from our career perspective and talent in the organization is mostly that on the left. So the strengths, the weaknesses. But we forget to cast our eyes wider into the broader context. So what are the opportunities out there, both for yourself and for the talent in your organization? And what are the threats? What threats from an environmental perspective will be in the future? And how do you deal with that? It might even change how you see your career. And to do this casting wider, we use what we refer to as environmental scanning. This is a very structured way looking at the political environment, the economic environment, the social technology, and then the natural environment, legal, and then values as well. How will our lifestyles change going forward? What cultural aspects do we need to take into consideration when we start employing people? The fourth method is what we refer to as 3 horizons. You'll note that horizon 1 starts with prevalence of what is happening. We are fairly sure that we know what will happen today. We cannot predict it with 100% of accuracy, but we are fairly sure what we'll be doing today. As you start with horizon 2, the prevalence is less obvious, so we might be confronted with aspects like virtual reality, and we've heard about it, but we haven't physically experienced it, perhaps. And then horizon 3 will be aspects that are fairly touching our lives at the moment, but will eventually be the disruptors going forward. And how do we take note of these 3 different horizons when we plan our careers? The 5th method is probably one of my favorites, and I think here Elon Musk is a good example. And even President Kennedy said we're going to put a man on the moon. The idea with backcasting is that you start with the vision in the future. So it is the opposite of forecasting. With forecasting, you predict going forward. With backcasting, you set the vision first, and then you work back to the present point in time and plan according to that. What are the assumptions that you need to make around that vision that you're going to set for yourself? So, in a nutshell, this is just a very high level taster of the methods that we use in determining our futures. What I would like to do is to spend most of our time today on how do we backcast if we were in a situation that we had to anticipate what a future job might look like. And I'm going to spend the next couple of minutes just briefly explaining the process, and we will then go into breakout rooms where I would like you to just explore and find a way of how you could play with this as a method going forward. So if we look at backcasting, the first thing that we have to do is to decide on the time frame. The time frame I've chosen for our example today would be 30 October 2050. So in other words, 30 years from today. What might that look like? If you go through the backcasting methodology, you would have to write down a challenge statement. For example, how might my career and job as an HR professional change in the future from Chief HR Officer to Chief Robot Officer? So I know this is stretching you, but I'm asking you to work with me here. The third step then would be you have to baseline the current context. And here you could look at technology, lifestyle changes, the environment, the economy, all the aspects that might be influencing you towards that vision that you're setting for your future, the one that will pull you forward. The fourth step, ideally then, you would look at the role of a chief robot officer and what might career success as a chief robot officer look like. So if you have to manage robots, and where we typically spend a lot of energy and time on policies, talent management, recruitment, learning and development, how would that be different if you were looking at the robots within your organization? Once you set that vision, you then work backwards to the present. So you look at the assumptions and the actions that you have to take to get to that ideal state. You do that again and again until you come back to the present point in time. And in step 6, you would look at possible obstacles. What might be some of the obstacles in order to realize this great vision of yours? And what are the potential opportunities? And how might you apply that? Step 7 would be what stakeholders would you need to involve? So from a chief robot officer, typically you may now need to look at the mechanics. How do you service these robots going forward? How often do you do that? Do you need mechanics, technicians, where as HR, we would possibly look at our HR officers? Would you have chief robot officers managing robot officers, or what might that be? And then you work forwards again. So you define the milestones and the interim objectives for, say, 2030 and then 2040. And you keep doing that until you reach that future date in order to get a more holistic context of what that might mean. So I've put together some instructions for our breakout rooms, which I will upload to the chat room now, but you're welcome to take a picture of this before we go into breakout rooms and work with this.
So when you mentioned the breakout rooms, we immediately lost 4 or 5 participants. So I think they they don't feel like participating today and rather watching. So we're 8 people on the call at the moment. I don't know if it's necessary then to do a breakout room, but it's up to you.
Let me just stop sharing. I'm going to split us into 2 groups.
Back again.
You're back again.
Some of us are back.
Yeah, how did it go?
It's really difficult, to be honest. Obviously, 4 minutes is not enough to do this.
Yeah.
You know, just to sort of define the future, you know, what do we think is the future going to be like? Is it, you know, what are we saying with the robots? Are they taking over? Or is the chief HR officer managing the people who are looking after the robots?
Yeah.
You know, and then when you were in our group, I also mentioned the sort of dystopian future where the robots take over everything and lock us up in our houses because, you know, there's too many dangers like COVID running around that can kill us, you know.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and who knows, our executives might decide that they want to work with robots more because they don't get COVID.
Exactly, yeah. But what was also interesting is there's a website called Will Robots Take My Job? And a lot of your repetitive type jobs, you know, are very much at risk. You know, engineers, accountants, you know, these kind of people that do the same thing over and over and over. You know, or not, you know, maybe over and over, but very logical, analytical is a fixed problem. Where jobs like what we do, HR, law, industrial psychology, we're kind of safe because the situations aren't, you know, standardized. There's not like a standardized, you know, environment. So so that was an interesting challenge in our group. You know, are we, what is that future like before we can even go and work our steps backwards?
That's true. So I know that we pressed for some time. So let me just quickly get to the last section. And let me share this. There you go. So I don't know if there are any questions, but you're welcome to reach out to me. I've listed my details there. You can even scan the QR code. If you scan this QR code, it will automatically upload my contact details to your phone or your mobile device. So I'm going to pause there. I don't know if you want to perhaps facilitate any questions. You're on mute, Kun.
I need to put a coin in the mute jar. If there's any questions, we're close to the end of our time. We are recording this, and I will also share Vanessa's details with you when we upload the recording. So if there are any more, you know, questions, or maybe you'd like her to come and do some interventions in your company, you know, you're welcome to contact her directly. So are there any questions? Anyone? No questions? That means that you've done your job really, really well. Everybody is fully ready for the future now. Ready to go, understanding all the challenges. And then if you have, brilliant, thank you. And if you have any questions, please let us know even afterwards. Vanessa, thank you so much for your time. If you have any concluding remarks, you're welcome. Otherwise, we'll stop it here, and then we.
Yeah, I can see that for us to think about the future is quite a challenge because we have to almost step into that imaginary space. But my encouragement to you would be try and practice this, even if you go back after work and just have a glass of wine, think about a different way of looking at the future and how do you open up possibilities rather than close them down. So thanks again, Kun. Really appreciative of your time.
Thank you so much, and have a good day and a good weekend. Talk to you soon.
Cheers, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.